Hi, this is Mark Dillon, host of the Mindful Vegan Podcast. I am super excited because I am right now formally announcing a free 7-day vegan plant-based challenge, and I would love for you to be a part of it. Now, if you're just starting out eating vegan food, or if you've been eating vegan for a number of years, either way, I guarantee you will find some incredible information here because this is unlike anything that I've ever seen out there. So let me give you the basics on it. It's going to be offered on Facebook in a private Facebook group. And for 7 days, I'll be getting together with you for a live interactive Facebook streaming program. This is so unique. I'm super excited to be sharing it with you. Here's the basics. Go to facebook.com/mindfulvegan and click on the link to sign up for this free 7-day vegan plant-based challenge. Welcome to the Mindful Vegan Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Dillon. This show is all about how do we bring great vegan food into our life. Well, today I'm going to be sharing an interview that I did with Jill Nussinow. You probably know her as the Vegan Queen. She has written a number of fantastic plant-based vegan cooking books, 2 of them which focus on pressure cooking. And pressure cooking is really taking off in the vegan community because it makes things so much faster. And when things are faster, it can be simplified. And so she's going to share with us some of her thoughts around vegan food, her journey into eating vegan food, and of course, she'll share a recipe with us as well. So we'll get into that in a little bit. Here's a little bit of a disclosure, so to speak, during the beginning of this episode. If you do not own a pressure cooker, please don't feel like, well, that's it, I can't do this or I can't do it right or whatever. A pressure cooker is simply a tool. It's something that can help you to prepare food in a certain way. Now, the advantages to pressure cookers, of course, is that they can be quicker. And when it's quicker, that can be more convenient. So that's a big plus. But here's the fact. I've been eating vegan now for over 2 decades, and just recently we bought a pressure cooker. So it's not that you can't do this without it. Sure, it's nice to have. It opens up a few new things, but the reality is every single thing that I make in the pressure cooker, I can make it without using a pressure cooker. So don't let that stop you. I know often we think, well, I need to have all these certain tools, or I need to have the right knives, or all these different things. You know, I don't have any fancy knives in the house when we prepare food. Heck, I remember being a bachelor way back in the day and not even having a cutting board. I would just use a plate or something like that. So we can make do with what we have. You know, we often get caught in that trap of, I have to have the newest, or I have to have the new gadget, or what everybody is talking about. But the reality is, to make great vegan plant-based food, all you really need is simply some very basic things. Yes, you'll need some kind of a knife, and it would be nice to have a few pots and pans, but the reality is you don't need all these high-tech kitchen equipment gadgets that are out there. They are nice to have, but don't let anything slow you down when it comes to eating great plant-based vegan food. I begin the interview here with Jill, asking her about her initial journey into eating vegan plant-based food. And I often do that at the beginning of an interview because I find it really helpful as others share their path and their exploration to help me to understand mine better. And this can be great if you are just starting to explore bringing vegan plant-based food into your life, because the reality is we don't often just wake up and that's it. In that moment, everything begins brand new and it starts off perfectly. For most of us, it's a journey. It's a path into this. So as you listen to Jill's transition, as you listen to Jill's journey into eating vegan plant-based food, think about your own. Where are the struggles that you're currently working with? Are there ways that you could overcome those struggles with simply looking at it in a different way? So here we go. Let's get into this interview with Jill as she tells us about her path, her journey to eating vegan, plant-based food.
I have been a vegetarian since I'm a teenager, and that came about basically because I did not like meat. I actually hated meat, and when I was about 13, I kind of refused to start to eat it. And I had a friend who became vegetarian, and so I was like, oh, I like that idea. And that's how I became a vegetarian. So I've been a vegetarian for a very long time. And then I think slowly over time, things just evolved and there was no reason, I didn't purposely become vegan. I just found that I didn't really need the other foods like eggs and cheese, and I never drank milk, so I didn't have to worry about that. But I just didn't need the other things in my diet. And then I think it was kind of, it was about 15 years ago, maybe a little longer, around the same time, there were many, many more alternatives. So I didn't really need anything else to make things work for me. They worked out just fine.
When you said that you weren't, you made that transition to going vegetarian, was it because of you didn't like the taste of meat, or it was more about what meat represented and what it really was?
Well, I actually have to say I never really thought about it, but one of the things that got me to realize what was happening was I didn't like the taste of it, and I couldn't stand the fact that it was bloody. And so what I would do is my mother would cook the meat, and then I'd take it into the kitchen, and I'd put it under the broiler, and then I'd bring it back to the table, and I'd dump ketchup all over it, which completely infuriated my father. And he was like, "Why do you do that?" And I said, "I don't know." And then I was like, "I hate this stuff." And I just, at that moment, realized why I didn't eat it. But it really didn't, I don't think it got into my consciousness about what it was until actually I had a little chicken incident where I was cooking a chicken for my sister, and I put the chicken on the roasting rack, and I looked down and I went, "Oh, that's a chicken." And that brought it all together and made me go, oh. It was just a funny thing. Like I didn't connect the animals to the meat, and I think a lot of people have that disconnect. And so that's really what did it for me.
Well, I think you're right. I think we have this disconnect to what's really in front of us because we are conditioned that this is food, and so we just take it in as food, and often it's not even seeing what's truly here. And even now, when you look at a lot of the packaging for processed and the meats and things like that at the grocery store, they actually put it on something so that you don't see that blood. It doesn't pool up inside the styrofoam container anymore. And it's interesting how we, at one level, sometimes know it, but then we want this disconnect. And it's a fascinating thing that really psychologically plays into this big time.
Well, I agree with that. I actually went to a conference and they were talking about pigs and CAFOs, and I came home and I said to my husband, they put these pigs in these cages and they can't even turn around. And he was like, "That's terrible." And so then he said, "Well, you know what they should do at the supermarket? They should put a picture of the pig in the cage right by where they sell the pork." And I said, "Honey, that is not a good marketing technique." And at the time, he wasn't even vegetarian, but he totally got why it's not okay. And I said, "I don't think they'll be doing that anytime soon." So he could even feel what that was about. But a lot of people, they don't want to know where their bacon came from.
Let's talk about your cooking, because you are a great chef and you do a lot of teaching and you help people to understand how to bring plant-based food into their life through cooking it. When did you first start having an interest in preparing food?
Oh, I started cooking actually when I was a teenager because I wanted to eat healthier food than my family ate. And so I started playing around with food. It was kind of the beginning of the natural foods movement. And there were a lot of things you could buy then, mostly very brown things. And so I started playing around making whole grain sourdough bread and that kind of thing. I also cooked when I was in college, and I collected recipes then, which are much different than the recipes that I do now. I actually didn't start teaching cooking until after I became a dietitian. And one of my first jobs, which it took me a long time to realize that this was the case. One of my first jobs was working for a large corporation doing lunch and learn talks, where I actually brought in an electric wok and made food for the audience. And that was about 30 years ago. And so that was kind of interesting to have already started doing that, and then actually moving into teaching cooking. That was just kind of a component of this lunch thing. And teaching cooking is a whole different thing. But I've been teaching at Santa Rosa Junior College for, I can't remember, 27 or 28 years now.
Well, let's go back to when you first started cooking and you were cooking for yourself within your family. What is it that allows somebody, here you are a teenager and you are stepping away from what others are doing? What do you think that quality is, or what gives you that strength, let's say, to do something like that that's different than not only those around you, but your family, your parents?
Well, my mother encouraged me to do whatever I wanted to do, so that was part of it. She didn't stop me. She let me play and make a mess in her kitchen, and that really helped. I don't know exactly. I could attribute it to the fact that I'm an Aries, and Aries women tend to do whatever the heck they want a lot of the time, but I don't know if that was it. It's just what I wanted to do. I wanted to check things out. And one of the things I used to do when I was an older teenager is I would go to the local farm stand and search out the most unusual vegetables and then try to figure out what to do with them and bring them home and make all kinds of crazy stuff. Some of which my family liked and some of which they did not, which is understandable because some of which I don't think I'd eat today. But yeah, it was just what I wanted to do. And I had the freedom in my family to do that.
Well, I know that you've done work to actually bring vegan, plant-based foods into cafeterias. And I'm curious, what did you learn during that time when you start introducing this into an institution about people and helping them to accept bringing vegan food that kind of came up or surprised you, I guess?
Well, the project that I did was at Kaiser Cafeteria, where I live in Santa Rosa, California. It was interesting because I was the lunch lady, and I was behind the line, and I would see what was happening with people. We changed the menu quite a bit, and it wasn't all vegan, but we had vegan options. But the thing that was most interesting was resistance to any kind of change and what that was really all about. And the people that actually had the hardest time with the change were the nurses and the doctors. And they were even saying, well, we're gonna go out to Jack in the Box. And I'd say, well, that's fine. So it was interesting. Some people were thrilled and some people were willing to try. But what I really noticed is a lot of resistance to just the general changes. Like we changed up the bread and got organic tortillas and brought in a really good salad bar. And one of the resistances was actually price. They didn't want to pay more for better food, which I think is one of the big issues in this country. People think everything should be really inexpensive or cheap, and it costs money and takes resources to produce high quality food. And so I think as people, we need to maybe change our expectations of what's out there and think about, what it takes a farmer to grow a product, that it's not 99-cent burgers, which I don't really know what they are, but I see the ads for them. But that's what people think they want. And then when you introduce really good food, then they're like, oh, and it's a whole different thing.
When you talk about that resistance, I've noticed one of the trends that seems to be happening more and more is restaurants and cafes are opening up, and they're not as open that what they're doing is serving vegan food. But in some cases, I've gone to restaurants that are completely vegan, and from outside, you wouldn't even know it. And the only reason I knew it was vegan was because I saw it on their website. Do you think that people have a preconceived notion of what vegan and plant-based food is like?
I think that they do. I think it's maybe a carryover from a long time ago. Oh, I had tofu. I didn't like it. But what I found over my years of teaching is that once you get people to just think of it as food, then they are much happier with it and they tend to like it a whole lot more. And one of the things that's interesting is I went to Berkeley recently and they have a place called the Butcher's Son, and it's supposed to be based on like a New York, New Jersey deli, which I don't know if I'd say that's what it was, but it was quite crowded at lunchtime, and I'm not sure how many people went there because it was vegan food, but from the outside, you don't know that it's vegan food. So I think if we can take away the vegan or plant-based and just say it's food, and if it's like food that people are used to eating, like lasagna or burgers that aren't pretending to be something other than veggie burgers, I think people will eat it, but I think a lot of people are like, ooh, it's vegan. It can't be good. And but then I think there are also a lot of people who it's the opposite. They want to try it and they want to see what it is. But I think a lot of it is expectations, like what it's going to be. And a lot of people, the thing that I found over time that really has to do a lot with vegetables, which kind of ties into this whole thing. People are afraid to try things that they haven't tried or things that they've tried once and didn't like. And so they're like, I tried lima beans. And I'm like, well, have you tried my Greek stewed lima beans with tomatoes? And they're like, no. And then they'll eat them and they're like, oh, that's good. But our initial thing is like, no, I don't want to do it. I think when it comes to food, vegetables, plants, vegan, plant-based, sometimes we act like 2-year-olds. And the first thing we say is no. And then I think we have to open our minds to the fact that something may be different than what we think.
It almost goes back to that kind of childhood scene of your parents saying, eat your vegetables. And we're still resisting, in a way, that authority or just being told what we should be eating.
Well, I think you're correct. I mean, I've done a lot of talks. I did a talk for a very large group, a Head Start group, and I was the keynote speaker, and I'd never done a keynote talk. And it really was about getting them to think about, I did a visualization with them about food and what their feelings were around a particular food that they didn't want to eat, because they were dealing with a lot of really little kids. And it was fascinating to hear what they all could immediately think of a food that they did not like when they were a child and still had feelings about. So it's partly like we don't want to be told what to eat, which is why it's great that there's, so many different vegetables and so many different plant foods. But the other part is a particular experience which could either be positive or negative, and few of them are neutral. Sometimes it's just like really getting people over that hump of like, no, I'm not going to try a green bean if it's purple, which actually happened at a farmer's market. There was a group of us egging this woman on to try the purple green bean, and she tried it, and she was like, oh, that's good. But literally it took like 10 people in order to convince her to even put it in her mouth. And so that woman, given the opportunity, with a purple green bean in front of her, if there weren't 10 people egging her on, she would not have ever tried it. And that's sad.
Who would you say it is that is the typical student for you? Is it somebody that is already into making vegan plant-based foods, or are they eating more of the standard American diet currently?
Well, it really depends where I'm teaching, because I've been teaching the McDougall program for more than 15 years. And a lot of those people have been eating the standard American diet. Some of them are quite ill and must change in order to have a better life and continue to live. And so a lot of them are just brand new. They don't know exactly what they're doing, and it's all brand new to them. But they also are in an environment where they're being served food, so they don't have to step in so quickly. They can watch me do it and other people teach them. So there's those people, and then there's classes that I teach in the community and at Santa Rosa Junior College. And there are all kinds of people. I've probably never had more than 50% vegan or vegetarian in a class. And over the years, I've kind of tracked it, and it's been usually around 25%. So the other 75% are people who either want to eat more vegetables, want to learn how to cook a variety of plant-based foods, or have someone in their family who is either vegetarian or vegan, and they want to be able to provide some food for them if possible.
Have you seen a common misunderstanding of people who start out to cook on what they might be learning, or maybe possible obstacles that they may be thinking about that don't necessarily come true as you start to teach them?
Well, I think there actually are a number of obstacles that sometimes when I'm teaching I forget about, but my classes distinctly remind me about this. Like, I know what tamari is, and I know what tahini is, and I know what tabbouleh is, and I know what bulgur is, and I know what quinoa is, but this is a completely new language for a lot of people. I mean, not so much anymore because you see, even quinoa on the menu at California Pizza Kitchen or other places. But, 15 years ago, I mean, people were like stymied by this. So I think there's that part. And the other part is people think they're going to be in the kitchen prepping all day long. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be that difficult. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that people can get over fairly quickly is the food can be rather simple and still be really delicious. In fact, my favorite foods generally are, any kind of colored rice and a whole variety of beans with fresh vegetables and salsa and maybe some avocado. I mean, it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to take you all day is what I want to say. And I think that's really important. So I think the misconception that it's going to take you forever to do this. The thing that often convinces them is tasting the food. And then they're like, oh, I'm there.
Well, and I think that as you are describing that, the beans, the rice, the vegetables, and really it's a very simple way to cook. It's also something that is one of the more affordable ways that we can bring great plant-based foods into our life as well.
It's amazing to me. I have actually thought about tracking how much I spend on, meals, just to see. And I know it's not a lot because if I cook like 1 cup of red rice, that will last me about 5 days. And I can't imagine that it costs more than I don't know, let's say $1 on the expensive side. That's like 20 cents a meal for that. And then beans are inexpensive, or any kind of legumes. It's all pretty affordable. The pricier part actually is what I deal in a lot, which is vegetables. And even then, I think they're pretty affordable. It's just how much you eat. And we are huge salad eaters. So I go through between 3 and 4 lettuces a week. For 2 of us, which is great. But I think for some people it can add up. But the main components of the meal, I tell people, even if they're buying heirloom beans, which might cost, $6 a pound, there is no other protein that you can get to feed people, and you can feed quite a few people on 1 pound of beans that you're going to be able to feed, 4 large servings to people for $1.50 compared to any animal protein. It just doesn't work like that.
Explore bringing great vegan, plant-based food into your life by taking a free 7-day challenge. Go to the store at mindfulvegan.com or visit facebook.com/mindfulvegan and sign up today. Well, let's talk about something that you are really well known for, and that's pressure cooking, because I think a lot of people have that old fear of the old pressure cooker. And can you bring us up to date on pressure cooking today?
Well, I'd love to do that. Well, it's interesting. One of my jokes is if I had $1 for every person who was afraid of the pressure cooker, I wouldn't even work. But I think that's changed a lot in the last 5 years since the modern pressure cooker, the one without the jiggler on top, the one that just doesn't go ch-ch-ch-ch, that one has been around for at least 20 years, probably closer to 30 years. But people have the scary one in mind. The one that's called the spring valve, which is the newer one, basically doesn't blow up. I've used it with my students for many years. They get very little instruction. Nothing bad has ever happened. So those are fine. But the really big thing in the last 3 to 5 years has been the electric pressure cooker, which many people have adopted, and it's very American, or North American. There's one that people have fallen in love with called the Instant Pot. And there are others. There's the Fager Lux, there's the Breville, there's all kinds of them that people they find them not scary, even though they do the same thing as the stovetop pressure cooker. But you can actually put your rice on and go take a walk and come back and your rice is cooked and hot and waiting for you. And that kind of has changed things for a lot of people. And, many people, though, it's interesting, I see they still are intimidated. They get the box, they put it aside, and it may take them anywhere from, a couple of weeks to a month to an entire year before they take it out of the box. So I have a very silly little video on YouTube that's taking the Instant Pot out of the box so people can see that it's really not scary to take it out of the box. They're often terrified when they get to the next part, which is the water test. But, I have a video on that too. And truly, the thing is, if you follow a plant-based diet, using a pressure cooker will absolutely change your life, because whole grains and beans take not that much time, especially the beans if they're soaked. And even if they're unsoaked, you're going to save a lot of time, and you're going to go from back to that economical part. You're going to go from buying canned beans, which you can get, at Trader Joe's and other places for like 99 cents a can, to being able to make at least 3 times that much for that same 99 cents. So it's really interesting, and I have to say, one of the things that I say is pressure cooking changed my life, and had I known when I said that many years ago that how much it would have changed my life, I never could have predicted, because I now have 2 pressure cooking cookbooks, which I certainly didn't think that I'd have, and I have 2 pressure cooking DVDs. Pressure cooking for me it's kind of the love of my life. I love to do it. I love to teach people about it. And the reason I do is because my mission really is to see people eat better and have happier and healthier lives. And following a plant-based diet and having a pressure cooker is pretty much the combo that's like winning the lottery.
I completely agree with you. We recently bought one, and I will say the one, little bit of a warning is this. If you get 1, 2 would be really nice.
Well, I agree, and I say in a perfect world, and I, of course, live in a perfect world, people would have a stovetop pressure cooker so that they could do their vegetables really fast, and they would have an electric pressure cooker in which they could make their rice or their curry or, whatever else they wanted. But for me, that's a perfect world, and of course, I have more pressure cookers than anybody really ought to own, so I can have a perfect world any day I want. But people do love having 2. It just kind of makes sense. But the electric ones the stovetop ones aren't that small, but the electric ones are bigger and harder to stash.
Well, that's why we just keep ours out on the countertop and use it just about, it seems like, every day for something. It's almost like it takes cooking and makes it fun. And you're sometimes waiting for it to finish so that then you can make beans, or then you can make rice, or you can throw a baked potato in there. And it's just really turned cooking into something that's quick, easy, affordable, and quite enjoyable.
I completely agree. And I have a fairly simple, it's funny because my latest book is Vegan Under Pressure, and it's, got a lot of really interesting recipes, but still my favorite things to cook are beans, rice, major amounts of potatoes and sweet potatoes. In the winter, I do whole winter squash. Still the simpler things, but you can do a lot at once, and this is what I think is so wonderful, is that you can take it and you can put extra in the freezer for when you don't want to cook or don't have time to cook. And that's what I love to do. I love to pretend that someone cooked for me, and that someone cooked for me and loved me so much that they made exactly what I wanted to eat and left it for me.
Well, speaking about great recipes, do you have a recipe that you could share?
Well, one of the ones that I really like that I made at a cooking class in North Carolina is a chickpea and broccoli salad type thing that's very easy to make, and it uses chickpeas or garbanzo beans, which are the same bean, just so people know, and you actually cook the chickpeas in the pressure cooker, and then you put in the broccoli. And part of the reason that I love this recipe is because the broccoli comes out super green, and it looks really good, and it just has pretty standard ingredients. It's got a Mediterranean flair to it, which comes from adding some red onion and parsley and Kalamata olives and a little bit of crushed red pepper. The dressing's pretty simple. It's lemon juice and vinegar and mustard and garlic. And it says extra virgin olive oil in the recipe and also miso. And what I want to say is because I teach the McDougall program, it's a no oil added diet. And what I tell people about my recipes is sometimes you will see a little oil in there and it's fine to take it out if you don't use it. It doesn't affect the recipes generally. If it does, it will say this recipe really is one that if you're following the McDougall program, you wouldn't want to eat because it's very much based on oil. But that is extremely rare. So in this recipe, you cook the chickpeas, you soak them, and you cook them for 12 to 14 minutes, which is how long it takes. And then you add beautiful broccoli and cook that very briefly. I think it's like 0 or 1 minute. And then you mix it all together and turn it into a beautiful salad.
So you've written a number of cookbooks, and for somebody that, let's say, is just starting off, which one would you recommend to them, and why would you recommend that one?
Well, my first book was kind of my first love, and it's called The Veggie Queen, Vegetables Get the Royal Treatment. And that book is not pressure cooking. So that one has vegetables throughout the seasons. And so I kind of love that book because I think it's a concept that many, many people still do not understand. In fact, I just wrote a blog post about it because somebody was talking in late June about cooking Brussels sprouts. And Brussels sprouts, where I live, are not in season and have not been in season since maybe February. So it's quite a number of months later, and vegetables will taste best in season. So that book is a really good kind of beginner guide. It has it according to the seasons and also a chapter on anytime cooking and a short one on pressure cooking. But as far as pressure cooking goes, my more basic book is The New Fast Food. Both books have really good timing charts, if I have to say so myself, but a lot of people say that. But the recipes in The New Fast Food are more basic.
Well, let's say that now we don't want to make it ourselves and it's time to go out to a restaurant. Do you have a favorite vegan restaurant that you go to that maybe in your community or maybe when you're traveling around that you look forward to going to? And could you tell us a little bit about why you like that one?
Well, I don't have a favorite one where I live, but I can get vegan food at a lot of different restaurants. Actually, the place that I like to get some vegan food when I am traveling, if I'm traveling through Portland or the Portland or Oregon area, is Yum, which offers these Yum bowls. But if you're vegan, what I have to say is you have to remember that they don't think that you have to tell them you want it vegan. Otherwise, they put cheese and sour cream on these bowls. But they're really good. They're really simple. They're not expensive. And that's the kind of food that I prefer to eat. I've gone to quite a number of really good vegan restaurants around the country. And honestly, my favorite vegan food is going to be the simplest vegan food, like a giant salad, a bowl of brown rice, and some vegetables. Maybe a little tofu thrown in. There's a restaurant at the San Francisco airport. It's a Japanese restaurant, and it always makes me happy because they have miso soup, brown rice, and edamame. And I'm like, okay, I can eat before my plane leaves. There is a restaurant in the San Francisco terminal I think it's called Plant, and they have good vegan food. I think it's kind of pricey, but it is an airport. And let me say, at an airport, I'm like, just give me the food.
It sounds like where you're living is a very common situation for a lot of people. They don't have, a major vegan restaurant nearby. I mean, most of us don't live in the LA area or other places that do have many great resources. How is it then that you go out, when you're going out to a restaurant that isn't a vegan restaurant, what would Jill be asking for? What would you sit down and enjoy at a place?
Well, it's funny you asked that because we're going out for dinner tonight, and I already looked at the menu, and I'm like, oh, I could have them make me the spinach salad and leave the cheese off, and I could have the pasta if they put this on it. And so often I'll look at the menu before I go. It's always a good idea, if you can, to call up and ask if they have anything vegan, or can they, change their dishes so that you'll be able to eat them. It's kind of a pain in the neck, and I really wish that more chefs would take a little bit of interest in offering better vegan food for the customers who come in. Because honestly, I'm sure that you found this. It's like, I don't want another plate of pasta primavera thrown at me, or even presented to me nicely. It's like, I want something innovative and tasty and different. And recently I got asked to work on a project that had to do with this, which was offering some new things on the menu at various restaurants. And I think, it's hard to figure that out because sometimes chefs have an ego and you don't want to tell them what to do. But a lot of times they have not had the training to even understand that if they have lentils with another dish and there's no bacon in it, that you could give that to somebody who's vegan and they might be happy with it. So there's a lot of training to be done in restaurants that aren't vegan per se. But I think the main thing for me, I went out with some people recently, and they must have thought that I was a little crazy, and it was fine. I didn't care. It was like a steakhouse kind of place, and I just got a big baked potato and a giant salad, and I actually was very, very happy. That's fine for me. And I try to tell people, unless you're going out for like the great vegan experience, don't focus so much on the food. Focus on the fact that maybe you're out with people and having a good time, and make it more social than food.
Great advice. And I've talked with a number of chefs, and they have said, and it's been vegan chefs, so I'll put that disclosure there, but they have said that we're seeing a lot more innovation within vegan cooking than is ever being done right now in kind of traditional cooking. So it's actually an exciting place for a lot of chefs to be looking at right now because it's getting really creative with incredible flavors and textures.
Well, I think that's true. And I think it always has been an opportunity to have a plant-based diet and really explore what's there, much more creative than if it were just a meat-based diet. Because on a meat-based diet, the center of your plate might be, beef or chicken or pork or fish. But on a plant-based diet, the center of your plate might be tofu. It might be tempeh. It might be an incredible veggie burger. It might be a bean ragu. It could be, a special kind of chili. Or, it's like there is so much more. And it could be that, it's not just regular chili. It's made with vaquero beans, or it's made with a special bean from Italy. Or, there's just so many more ingredients to play with that I think it makes it a much more interesting meal. And anyone who gets an opportunity to go to one of these more upscale vegan restaurants will see how incredible the food could be at somewhere like Crossroads in LA, or Gracias Madre, or Portobello in Portland, or the Ravens in Mendocino, or in North Carolina, in Asheville. I have a place called Plant, I think, a place, and the food there was amazing. It's like top quality food that you're thrilled to have, but it's not your everyday eating experience. I think chefs have a great opportunity to really showcase their talent with plant-based food.
Looking at what's been going on kind of in the vegan food world lately, what's kind of on that horizon for you that is catching your eye, or maybe bringing some excitement into your life of, wow, this is where things might go next?
That is a great question. I think lately I've been kind of going the opposite way. Well, I'm tired of this or that. Do we really need another vegan cheese? So I'm not really sure about that. The thing that I would really like to see is really how seeing chefs and just more people, how to make the food you have available taste better than it's tasted in any form. And the real bottom line with that for me and for most chefs that I talk to is the ingredients and what you start with. And so starting with better ingredients is always going to give you a better result, even if it didn't come out perfectly. And so I'd like to see a coming back more to what's truly natural. I don't think we need one more packaged or processed product on the market, even though I think there's some really good ones. And there's some that I think would just be better not in people's mouths and their diet. So I would just truly like to see a bigger push for consumers, not so much for chefs, but for consumers to forget more about what's in the package and figure out what can be more on their plate that they could actually make for themselves. And I know people don't have a ton of time, but it's not that hard to make yourself food. And I really wish people would embrace the fact that making food for yourself really is the best way to nourish yourself and care for yourself.
It's really a direct way to care for yourself in so many different ways. In that moment, you're caring for yourself. And of course, long term, for your health, you're caring for yourself also. So it's just truly worth taking that kind of time.
Well, what I tell people is the way that you get your food, just how you want your food, is to cook it for yourself, which is the big reason to cook. And that means that I never have to encounter a green pepper in my food because I don't like green peppers. I don't have to have, licoricey tasting food if I don't want it. So I think that's the main thing. And some people want their rice mushy. Some people want their rice firm. Some people want their beans cooked, a long time. Some people want their collard greens to be gray. I know how I like my food, and it's just a perfect opportunity for me to make it exactly how I want it.
So we were talking a little bit about that processed food, and I remember having Dr. Greger on recently, and he said, yeah, it's better than, the animal-based, of course, but the whole foods, the whole plants, that's really where, that's our ideal. And I think, you do a lot of work with Dr. McDougall and, of course, Dr. Campbell's work. It seems to me like a lot of people are really starting to get into vegan food, and I'll even say they're not even looking at vegan food. They're coming in to eat plant-based food, and I think that that's an interesting change in things. And I'm wondering, as you're teaching people to cook, are you finding that more and more?
I think I am, and one of the things that is important for me is I will teach anybody how to make more plant-based food because I think it's really important. And I say no matter what people eat, probably 70 to 80% of what they eat ought to be plants, maybe more. And I think that's really important. So people are discovering. Everybody knows eating more vegetables is a good thing, but very few people really know what that means. And if you look at a standard American diet and the size of a bowl of salad, I mean, it's probably maybe a cup to a cup and a half. And my salad is probably 4 to 6 to 8 cups. And so it's a big difference. So I think you've got to move people along slowly, but I think that when they discover there are foods that they can cook and make and they like them, like something like quinoa, which is easy to do, or brown rice, I think the barriers are kind of dissolving, and people are like, yeah, I want to learn how to cook a bean. And many people don't even realize that beans come dried or any way other than in a can. So there is a lot of education to be done, but I think people want to get there. I think the more doctors that can get on board, the better, because doctors can help, and the more that dietitians like myself can get out into the world and teach people that there is more than hospital food, and that it can be really tasty and good for you, I think that's where the key is. And like I said, people don't really care what the food is as long as it tastes good. We don't eat necessarily for our health, although as people get sicker and sicker, they're wanting to. But we eat because it's something that tastes good to us and we like it and it's easy to do and so on.
What's the best way that people can stay in touch with you?
The best way for people to stay in touch with me is to check out my website, thevegiequeen.com, or they can find The Veggie Queen on Facebook. On my website, they can sign up for my monthly newsletter, which I send out and has recipes that often don't appear anywhere else. They can also find me on Twitter as The Veggie Queen. They can find me on YouTube, not as The Veggie Queen, but as The VQ, because The Veggie Queen couldn't remember her password one day and had to change to The VQ. Those are the best ways to get a hold of me, although I do have a Pinterest account and an Instagram account, but I'm not as active there.
Thank you so much for sharing everything you did today.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate you having me on.
Well, this brings to close today's interview. But before we go, I'd like to invite you to visit the website at Mindful Vegan and go specifically to mindfulvegan.com/73. And there you will find all of the information that Jill just shared, including easy-to-click links so you can check out her website and stay in touch with her, as well as find out more information about the Instant Pot and pressure cookers and find out links to check out all of her books. Until we get together again next week, go enjoy some great vegan food.